Samsung Galaxy A54 5G is a brand new mid-range smartphone powered by the Exynos 1380 chipset. With a lovely Super AMOLED screen, a decent set of cameras and quite a premium build. We've just released the unboxing and first impressions video where we talk mostly about the hardware of this device. Today, let's go through the setup experience and talk a bit about the software of this smartphone. We don't need much to start. Just the phone, a SIM card ejector tool which was included in the box, or a paper clip will do, and a SIM card. Oh, and keep your old device, Wi-Fi and Google passwords handy as well. The SIM tray is at the top. If you're just using the SIM card, put it in tray 1 with the pins facing upwards. If you have a second SIM or a micro SD card, it would go in the second slot. Then just align the hole in the tray with the one on the phone and we're good to go. Also, I was in a bit of a hurry, as I was heading out to an event and I didn't notice that there was some plastic across the sides of the device. Don't be like me and make sure to remove it. But let's switch the device on and get started with the setup. You'll see the Secured by Knox logo, indicating that it uses Samsung custom security framework, as well as Powered by Android logo. We then get Welcome by Samsung, and I have to say that the translation to Polish isn't the best. The button says Początek, which means the beginning, rather than asking you to start something, but that's just me being picky. I'll go with English UK, which is pre-selected here out of lots of languages and dialects. Great to see all of them. There's a lot of terms and conditions, so make sure to read it throughout if you ever get bored. You can also agree or not to sharing diagnostic data with Samsung, and I skipped it here. You can then use another device to set this one up, which might be good if you want everything from one phone moved to another. However, I prefer to start afresh, as I review a lot of devices and want the full experience. Next, let's log into Wi-Fi. Interestingly, it's at this stage that the phone restarts to get the network settings, so let's wait a moment. In my case, it took 1 minute and 50 seconds from pressing restart to the next screen, which is copying data from another device, and again, I went with a clean start. Next, let's log into Google, which is technically not mandatory, but without it, you might not have access to apps like YouTube or Google Maps, etc. If you have two-step verification enabled, you'll also have to confirm that it's you, so make sure to have your old phone or some other device handy. Next, you can confirm if the installation is for you or a child. I'll just go with the normal one here. Then you can keep the Google account connected with your phone number. I have this enabled for my main SIM card, but I didn't enable it here for my secondary SIM, which I only use for testing purposes. Then there's more terms and conditions, as well as a lot of permissions for Google: device backup, use of location, Wi-Fi scanning and sharing diagnostic data, which I skipped. Next one is common in Europe, choosing your search engine. While I'm still in the Google camp for now, I'm getting closer to moving over to Bing, thanks to its AI capabilities. We'll see soon, but for now, it's Google. Here's the part I like: security. You can use face recognition and fingerprints. I'll start with face recognition using the 32 megapixel front-facing camera. There's a reminder that it's less secure as it can be quite easily spoofed. Speaking of AI, I'm guessing people will find ways to circumvent it, but I'll be going with it for a test. But first, we do need a secondary protection. I'll go with the pattern. Okay, let's register my face. It actually takes just a moment, so it might not be super secure indeed, so keep that in mind. You can then decide if you want to skip the lock screen or not, which I did, but I required open eyes for a bit of security. If you went with face recognition, you won't be asked to enable fingerprint scanning, so if you want to do it after the phone setup, go to Settings and search for fingerprint. You can then add your fingerprint data. I scanned my right thumb twice for a higher chance of matching, and the left thumb once as well. So far, after a few days, I can't say it's the fastest or as good as my favorite side-mounted scanners I like on Xiaomi devices, but it works fine so far. Back to the setup, we have the Google Assistant setup. For most people, this is not needed since you'll probably have done this in the past. And indeed, I didn't have to do it again, so all good. You can also decide if Google Assistant should be available when your phone is locked. Again, once AI training becomes more popular, we might have to be more cautious, but for now, I went with it. Next, there's some apps which will get installed on your phone. Unfortunately, there's no way to untick any of them, and clicking back will just take you to the previous steps. so you'll have to go with it for now. Luckily, you can uninstall them in the future if you don't need them, so it's not a big problem. Next, you can log into the Samsung account. I already have one linked to my Google account, so I did that, but if you don't have it yet, you can create the account here. It's not mandatory though. There's also some permissions for the Samsung account, and all of them were optional, so I skipped them. I also got a confirmation in the text to my main device to make sure it's me. Better safe than sorry. There's also Samsung Wallet, and again, you can skip receiving marketing materials here. And some more permissions from Samsung, especially if you have some smart home devices from them, like my Samsung TV or SmartThings Hub, so I went with it for convenience. Finally, back to the device setup, you can either go with the light mode or dark mode. I went with dark mode as it's an OLED screen. And we're all done. Great stuff. You can start using your device now. Well, almost. You'll get a few more recommendations before we start. And even before that, you can finalize the SIM card setup. In my case, I'll be using my spare Lebara SIM card and won't be using an eSIM at this point. But if you want, you can either add a second SIM card or an eSIM. I might do that soon for my upcoming trip to Singapore and Indonesia actually. Okay, we're back to the previous recommendations screen. You can select your gender and age bracket. However, I'm not sure how useful that was, since most of the recommendations were some random games. The one app that I selected here was Amazon Prime Video, but the rest didn't seem too useful for me, so I skipped them. 1 star for app recommendations, Samsung. Let's hope it helps them know it wasn't too useful for me. And we're finally here on the home screen. You might get a please finish the setup option in the notification bar, but it will just ask you some questions you'd already answered, so I just clicked through it quickly. One of the first things I always do is to change the navigation type from buttons to gestures. I got used to it on Pixel devices and haven't looked back. I found it by searching for navigation, but if you go to the settings and display, you'll find the navigation bar options as well. The other thing is the screen refresh rate. And you can either choose adaptive, which will switch between 120 Hz for battery smooth experience and lower refresh rates to save battery when that's not needed, or you can go with standard 60 Hz if you want to save some battery life. I'll keep it at adaptive. Let's talk about the software now. When I set the device up on the 1st of April, the phone came with the February security update and OneUI 5.1. There was a day 1 software update, but it didn't update the security patch or the OneUI version, instead improving the camera device behavior and updating some apps in the background. Still better than nothing, and February is still good in early April, so let's hope they keep it up. The phone is running on Android 13 and it should get software update for the next 4 years and security updates for 5, which is always great. Straight out of the box, you get 28GB of storage taken by the system, so the remaining 100GB is left for you. However, after installing a few games like Call of Duty and recording a few 4K videos, I went up to almost 50GB of storage taken, so do keep that in mind. Luckily, you can expand it with a microSD card if you run low on storage. You can also uninstall some of the apps which get preloaded. Unfortunately, there's quite a lot of them. There's Google apps, which are expected to be here, so that's fine with me. Then there's quite a lot of Samsung apps. Some of them might be useful, like File Explorer, the messaging app, or voice recorder. But you might not need some of the others like Samsung Wear or Health, SmartThings, Smart TV, or Bixby, which I'm not sure if anyone uses, especially now that the AI is coming. Luckily, you can uninstall most of those apps, except for a couple like the File Explorer or our friend Bixby, which is probably deeply integrated into the system. On top of that, there's a few Microsoft apps like Office, OneDrive, LinkedIn, and Outlook, which you might need when using this as a work phone, but might not otherwise. And did I mention random games like Royal Match and Coin Master, and apps like TikTok or Nextdoor? Oh well. One more thing worth noting is replacing the Samsung browser with Chrome for Android. I made sure to replace it in my favorites bar. I haven't used Samsung devices in a few years, so I'll have to get used to the design language of OneUI 5. It always used to be a bit cartoony, but to me the colorful icons look a bit funny. I'll also have to get used to the up drawer, which scrolls horizontally rather than vertically, and which for some reason doesn't show all the apps I have. For example, games are automatically put into the games launcher, forcing me to open it each time, but I'm sure I'll get used to it. Luckily, there are a lot of positives. For example, the camera app. It has a lot of options and settings, as well as some artificial intelligence. For AI, the main one is the single take mode, which takes different photos and videos at the same time, and you can pick the best option after the fact. Not sure I'd use it much, but it's there for you. Similarly, not really AI, but there's fun modes, which are basically Snapchat filters built into the camera app. Again, not for me, but I don't know what the kids like these days. There's a lot of camera modes, like Pro Photo and Video, Night and Macro modes, different slow motion and hyperlapse options, etc. And the photo editing app, in addition to all the usual editing modes, has object removal, which we've seen on the Pixel phones built in. I tried it on a couple of photos and it worked quite well, so it's great to see. After a few days of usage, I can't complain about the performance either. The Exynos 1380 chipset is definitely good enough for daily usage and everything is working fine. I talked more about the gaming performance in the unboxing video, but today I also checked Genshin Impact. It started in low quality settings, which is still good enough and was quite smooth, but switching to medium resulted in an overheating warning. I still played it for around 10 minutes and the phone did get a bit warm, plus the game was a bit less smooth, but the low quality setting should be good enough for most people, especially on this mid-range device. That's it for the setup and software experience of the Samsung Galaxy A54 5G. We'll soon release more videos about this device, including some case videos and in the future the long-term review. Let us know if you'd like us to compare it to other devices like the Nothing Phone 1 or last year's A53, and we'll look into that as well. But for now, thanks for watching!